called Alfred Naro.
Mr Speaker, I rise and take the final call on the third reading of the Social Assistance Portability to Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau Bill. And Mr Speaker, I want to make reference to the comments that were made by Mr Seo, and in particular when he talks about actions speak louder than words. Can I remind the member that in 1990, the Social Welfare Transitional Provisions Act, actually the Act indicated that you needed to have 7 years rather than 5. The years changed, so there was 5 years to make it a lot more equitable. And can I remind that member that the Green member that spoke, Jan Logie, also talked about the petition for change for the provision of the portability of the pension has been happening since 1990. So if we're going to talk about actions speak louder than words, then when under that government, when the Labour were in government, why were there no changes made? I tell you the reasons why. Because actions speak louder than words. So here we are, the Honourable Minister Murray McCully putting actions to his words, and actually under this government, we are making it happen. Since 1990, the petition has been happening. Let's also talk about, if we talk about actions speak louder than words, to our Cook Island, Niue and Tokelau community that's out there. The inquiry that was taken in 2010, the inquiry into New Zealand's relationship with South Pacific nations. One of the issues that it talked about was the Pacific Parliamentary Forum. Now, the member, Mr Seo, will know that this is not a new issue. In fact, they talked about it that when Mike Moore was in Parliament, he talked about it. When Helen Clark was in Parliament, she talked about it. But guess what happened? Under that government, when they were in government, nothing happened. So what happened? Minister McCully turned around, and in 2013, we had the very first Pacific Parliamentary Forum. 138 members from across the Pacific came here, and for the first time we talked about issues that affect our Pacific nations. Mr Speaker, when actions speak louder than words, it's under this government that we make it happen. The last thing, because it's good to have a trifecta, is that when we talk about actions speak louder than words, it was under a Labour government that the Minister of Pacific Island Affairs portfolio was taken out of cabinet for the very first time. The Pacific community turned around and said, why? Why did this happen? Under a Labour government, they couldn't understand it. Why? Because for all the talk, for all the rhetoric, they weren't appealing to the so-called submissions of the Pacific community. No, Mr Speaker, I don't stand and take those comments. I stand and actually proclaim the things that this government has done that's make a difference. Mr Speaker, I'm going to round off my speech with just a few comments which I think are actually really important to actually address some of the issues of concern. And when I address the issues that Louisa Ward had made, when she turned around the discrimination. Now, I'm going to read this out really clearly, that some members have also said that it's unfair that migrants can come to New Zealand and qualify for full New Zealand superannuation. Now, no, I'm just reading from this. Hang on, let me finish. Okay, residents in New Zealand, whereas people who live in the Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau, must have 20 years residence. That's the point I want to make, the 20 years residence. This bill does not discriminate against people from the Cook Islands, Niue or Tokelau. People from these islands who remain in New Zealand are subject to exactly the same rules as all other New Zealanders. I want to make that point really clear, to all other New Zealanders. Now, there's been a lot of misinformation that's gone out to our community to believe that there's a discrimination, there is an injustice. Absolutely, there is not. So what you're talking about is the special portability provisions that are there as well. Mr Speaker, I want to be very clear that these provisions that are there are absolutely important, that they do allow for the migration back into the Pacific, which is what the communities have asked for. If we're talking about what they've asked for, Mr Seo, this is what they've asked for. Those Pacific nations, those Pacific leaders, and when they came and they presented, these are the things that we've been waiting for. These are the things that we've been waiting for a very long time. So this government put actions to the words and have making it happen. So the last thing is around this 5 years, which is, you're absolutely right, Mr. Derek Ball, 12 out of the 13 submissions said, can we find that there is some discretion around that? There is no discretion for anybody. So when we talk about those who have discretion, you're right, there are those where there is a social security agreement, a reciprocal financial arrangement that is made with those particular nations, like the UK, like Canada, like Australia, and that's where that arrangement. There is no discrimination that is there at all. So therefore, all New Zealanders, all Cook Islanders, all Niueans and all Tokelau's have exactly the same. I want to finish off by saying this. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that's ensuring that when the community of the Pacific have asked for portability of their pension, they shall receive it. They'll be able to go back, and when they go back at the age of 55, my parents are residing back in the Cook Islands as we speak, and they're there now. When we have asked for the reasons why, it's this reasons why, Mr. Speaker, because it allows for them to return back, to give back to their local economies, so that depopulation doesn't happen where they're migrating out. They return back and they can return and give something back to those local economies. Mr. Speaker, this is a good bill. It's a bill that we know that right across the House has added support. Bar 1 point of difference. We've justified that. We know what that is. You're absolutely right. 245 people every year. Is that will impact? Increasing by about 100 who can make the application. We know that's there. But Mr. Speaker, we know that actually it's clear. The provisions of the bill make the difference. Mr. Speaker, I lastly want to finish this. There were some comments made by New Zealand First and its leader that there were promises made back in the Cook Islands by Andrew Bailey and by myself at the Swordfish, Swordfighters Bar, whatever it is. There were absolutely no promises that were made. No promises that were made. The only promise that was made was this. The only promise made was this, that we would address the issues of the 5 years. And I can say that with hand on heart, that's the only promise that was made, to was address the issue of 5 years, not to fix or change that. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud about this bill. I am married to my beautiful wife, Makawina Fui Manangara, who's Samoan and Niue, comes from the beautiful village of Tokelau in Niue, and I'm of Cook Island descent, and I'm proud that this bill will make a difference. I commend this bill in its third reading to the House.
Order. Members, this debate has concluded. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Social Assistance, Portability to Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau Bill, third reading.
I call on Government Order of the Day number 3.
Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Transitional Provisions Amendment Bill, third reading.
Mr. Speaker.